Hello and welcome back to the World Championship in Through the Ages. After I was joined by Kogito for the last video, which maybe ended up being a little bit too long, so lesson learned for the next time. But I'm happy that still a lot of you watched it, and it was also still a great experience commentating together with Kogito, and we had a lot of fun. And now I'm back in solo mode, and we will start taking a look at the first one of the two-player games. After I sadly barely missed out on winning in the last three-player game, I am now in a position where I don't have it in my own hands any longer whether I can still win the group or not. I just need to win all of my games, and then I'm a bit dependent on some results from Kogito. So not a great position to be in, but I still at least want to do my best in order to fulfill my part and to remain with chances for the first position in this group. And the first two-player game that we are taking a look at today is the game against Kogito. And now, without further ado, let's hop right into the game. In this game, I'm playing in the first position, and first of all, we can take a look at the leaders and wonders. And in two-player games, of course, we first want to take a look at what culture leaders are in the game. And we have Bach, Shakespeare, and Darwin. And there are also Marlene Dietrich, Chaplin, Fleming, anti-Hollywood, anti-internet in Age 3. So this game definitely has the potential to become a culture fest at the end. There's maybe Napoleon as a little bit of a military counter. We have some economical wonders like railroad and ocean liner service. There's Pierre in Age 3 who also can generate a lot of culture generally. Pierre and Sid Meier work also quite nicely with the internet. Then we have Einstein as a science leader. We have Nobel as a science leader in Age 2. There's also Robespierre as another military action leader. In Age 1 we have Joan of Arc as a military action leader. Nostradamus as a very strong leader. We have Eleanor and Columbus as transitional leaders. Then there's Michelangelo, who maybe can work nicely if you get a lot of production going. And then we have no Universitas, no Silk Road, but Himeji Castle and the Great Wall, so the two strength wonders, and Machu Picchu and the Taj Mahal. I'm in first position, and it is a very easy choice here, I would say. I can take the library, a very strong one. That's the only wonder in the row, and there are a lot of leaders in the row, so I think that's a very easy first choice, and I will go with the library, and I expected Kogito to go for Hammurabi here. And that's also what he will be going for. And at my turn, I then had to make a decision about what leader I want to go for, and I have the option here to maybe go just for something solid. So for example, I could either go for Alex and Ashoka for one civil action, which is maybe a little bit underwhelming, but Ashoka in first position and generally in two-player games I think is not that great, so I wouldn't be too happy about it, but I could maybe be willing to just take Boudica for an additional civil action here. She's definitely quite a strong leader, the additional science is very helpful and just makes me very flexible, so I could just go for something like this, get some guaranteed value out of my leader, but as I'm playing in first position and I'm playing against Hammurabi, I made the decision here to maybe instead go with Caesar, who is available for one civil action, and just build a mine, increase my population. I was not totally certain about it. There's not that much synergy in the game. There's no Suez Canal, so if I draw some colonies and set up for them, there's not a big payoff at the end. And it might be that Kogito will now go for the Colosseum, as it is the only wonder available, and there's no early Silk Road or Universitas that he could be hoping towards. And then with the Colosseum, maybe he can defend against potential aggressive play with Caesar relatively nicely. But it might still cause a little bit of pressure for him. I can maybe get some value out of the event deck, and he's available for one civil action instead of Boudica, who is available for, compared to Boudica, who is available for two civil actions. At the end, I was willing to go for Caesar, but didn't feel too great about the choice. But I, at the end, liked him more than going for those a bit underwhelming leaders that are available for one civil action. I also wasn't willing to take Boudica for an additional civil action here. In my first draw, I get one event, one aggression, and a colonization card. Kogito will go for Hammurabi, does indeed go for the Colosseum, which is maybe not the greatest one on two-player games, but he doesn't really have a big alternative. And with Hammurabi and with playing against Caesar, I think it makes a lot of sense for him to go for that wonder, and the happy face at least can be quite useful later on if maybe the goal is to set up for some of those culture leaders. Now it is my turn, and this turn, as you can see, I first of all made the decision to go for this raid. Kogito maybe was for a moment afraid, oh no, does he have drawn a double aggression because he has only this one H1 card in hand, but I actually don't have drawn an aggression. The reason is why I'm going for this raid is That is that I actually made the decision to go for Nostradamus this turn. I will take him, I will elect him immediately, and I would have discarded a raid, and I don't have an ability to use the military action, so it's of course better to just play it and maybe remove the one card from Kogito. That could actually still be a bit annoying for him. Maybe he's drawn a tactic or something else that he ideally would like to keep, so I make him discard this card. And of course I could maybe keep Caesar a little bit longer, but now Kogito could even just take Nostradamus in hand, who I think is maybe a very nice leader anyway to have, especially with getting a third military action from the Colosseum. So I felt like Caesar isn't, with this early Nostradamus, not really any longer doing any great things for me, and so I rather wanted to go for Nostradamus myself. I think it's a very nice way to generate a bit of a culture lead in a two-player game. He will give me a lot of information now that I am electing him very, very early. And so at the end, I thought it maybe is nice to just switch to Nostradamus, especially because I have to spend my civil action somehow. I could, for example, just go for something like Alchemy and maybe another yellow card, but I also don't want to let the monarchy fall down to one civil action for Kogito. I could just take the monarchy for 3, but that just, I felt it's maybe a bit too expensive, especially Kogito with having the Colosseum can maybe also, doesn't need the third military action that urgently, so at the end I just went for Nostradamus, built a step of the library. I could have also built my second lab already, but that allows me to keep a free population while not going into consumption. And I think in a game where there's Shakespeare and Darwin available, it can be worth it to maybe leave yourself with one lab for a little while longer to allow the chances to go very cleanly into a printing press. Also, there's another copy of Alchemy coming down the road. Maybe I can potentially build an Alchemy directly at some point, and so I built the step instead of the second lab, and for my last civil action I went with the frugality. I could have taken the alchemy, but there's another one coming down the road, and as said, I don't want to let the monarchy fall down to one civil action for Kogito. He will very likely take it for 2, so I would just gifting him one civil action if I take the alchemy here. And I could also just increase my population, but a frugality with not going into consumption now is worth 2 food, and having a bunch of population is not bad, so at the end that was my turn. I will draw 2 cards. I draw the vast territory in the Dark Ages. And I didn't see the barbarians with Caesar because I wanted to keep the event available for Nostradamus, and I also have to question if I even want to seed it into the deck, because I will very likely have the culture lead now that I go for Nostradamus. Kogito will increase his population, takes the monarchy for 2 civil actions, builds the second lab, and then is willing to go for Eleanor, which I think makes sense. He can now just keep Hammurabi for a while, and then use Eleanor as a very nice transitional leader. Is willing to pass on the alchemy, but that's maybe fine. He draws 1 card, and I will start seeding. It's a bit tricky which event do I want to play. The vast territory I think is just too swingy. I don't want to commit to that until I am relatively confident that I'm able to win it. The Dark Ages with me having the library, and also with me at this turn making the decision to go for the alchemy could also backfire, especially because Kogito will already get into a government form while I want to leave myself open, so the Dark Ages was also a no-go. At the end I went with the barbarians, which is of course risky. It's an event that can very likely only hurt me and doesn't give me any benefits, but the benefit that it does give me is the culture for seeding with Nostradamus, and I was hoping that with the strength bonus from Nostradamus I'm not too much in danger of getting hit by it. The development of politics is open, which gives me some interesting draws. Another colonization card, and with the ability to hold an additional card in hand, I can actually potentially keep both colonization cards and the vast territory. There's also a cartography coming down the road, so maybe I can actually set myself up to win this colony potentially. And yeah, I this turn just finished the library, get the additional science production going. I could then do a bunch of different things. I could just increase my population 2 times to use my civil actions effectively on my own civilization instead of going for alchemy, maybe leaving myself open for printing presses, and with that being nicely prepared for Shakespeare. But if printing presses are not on the row yet, maybe there's a chance that I will get the iron at the next turn, so maybe I could say I will start going for iron and then at some point go for the printing presses. I do think that could be a fine decision. Maybe I should have done that because Kogito likely will just do the revolution. He doesn't have enough science to go into iron immediately anyway, so that could be interesting. Maybe I could then just take the urban growth and increase my population, or I could take the urban growth and the bread and circuses with there being Pierre available, even though with all of those theater leaders, I do think that the bread and circuses is not that ideal of a technology to have, as maybe going for one of those leaders that potentially synergize with the Hollywood could be interesting. At the end, I still made a decision to go with the alchemy, because with the urban growth, if there are some additional resources revealed, I could just build an alchemy directly at the next turn. It could still give me a nice economical boost, and maybe if I at the end even have a chance to win the vast territory, it could be that I maybe can still go for printing presses even after having committed to a second lab. So I made a decision to take the urban growth and the alchemy, still not going into consumptions, but still having a free population available, and as said, maybe with the option to go for building a lab directly at the next turn. And for the cards to keep, I indeed made a decision to keep the vast territory in the 2 colonization cards, especially if Kogito doesn't take the cartography and maybe I have the chance to take it. It could be quite nice, potentially pushing this vast territory into the deck, but I also draw the Crusades and with that have an alternative in case I don't want to commit to the vast territory at the next turn. Kogito will indeed go for the revolution, so doesn't take the iron away. He will then increase his population and gets out of corruption. Now it is my turn. I am not willing to take the cartography for 2 civil actions here, and as long as Kogito still has the chance to take it, I didn't want to commit to the vast territory and instead seeded a safer event, the Crusades, into the deck. The event revealed is the development of settlement, giving me an additional population, and as you can see, the first card that I'm grabbing immediately here, even though it is a bit expensive to implement it into the turn, is the Code of Laws. I do think getting additional civil actions early in the game, or securing the few sources that give additional civil actions, especially now in a game without pyramids, without Forbidden City, is extremely important, and so I didn't want to give Kogito the Code of Laws, even though he doesn't have the science to go into it immediately. I don't want to give him the option to very nicely upgrade his monarchy up to 6 civil actions in the near future, and myself being stuck on 4 civil actions and being very dependent on the H2 government forms. So I do think the Code of Laws, even though it's quite expensive to take it, you will see that my turn after taking it will look a little bit awkward. I have now only 2 civil actions left, and I also still need to get out of corruption, but I still think it's totally worth it to go for the Code of Laws here. And then with my remaining 2 civil actions, I could potentially, for example, just increase my population, build a second lab or something like this. But at the end, I made a decision to take the iron. If I don't take it, there's at least a chance that Kogito, with having 6 civil actions thanks to Hammurabi, maybe just is willing to pay an additional one to deny me getting into iron and being stuck on bronze mines, not knowing when I maybe can upgrade to more civil actions with a government form. I do think can be a bit annoying, so I wanted to secure my copy of iron here. However, that means that I don't build a second lab, which at least is maybe nice in a sense that I can still try to build an alchemy directly and with that save a civil action, but I then increased my population, build an additional warrior. The warrior is maybe not that ideal, but I have the Crusades in the deck. Maybe I will push the vast territory into the deck, and for both of those things, maybe having this additional warrior could actually be quite fine at the end. So not an ideal turn, but I just thought it is a necessity to secure myself the copy of Code of Laws, and then afterwards the turn is a bit awkward, but at the next turn I can either maybe build an alchemy directly, I can start some iron production, and so I should have some nice options to get my economy started, and thanks to Nostradamus I'm already generating a little bit of a culture lead. I will draw 1 card, the Fighting Band tactic, which could be nice to have, makes it maybe more likely that I'm able to win the vast territory. Kogito opens the development of warfare, not that great to see for me, with already having committed to an additional warrior now. Kogito will take a warrior, finishes the Colosseum this turn, takes the breakthrough, the irrigation, and increases his population. Doesn't take the iron, but he still has a chance to take it at the next turn. And now it is my turn, and I, with now the cartography being gone, with me having 2 colonization cards and the Fighting Band tactic, and also going up to 3 warriors, with still taking the additional warrior from the development of warfare, made a decision to cede the vast territory, as it can just give me a very, very strong benefit if I should be able to win it, and I was relatively confident that I have at least some decent chances to win it, even though if it remains a bit longer in the deck and maybe Kogito starts drawing some additional cards with Eleanor, of course it could backfire, but it was a risk that I was willing to take here. The development of crafts are revealed, and for this turn I think I again have a bunch of different options. First of all, I will take the free warrior. I could then, for example, just go for 2 iron upgrades, which would get me out of corruption, leaving myself with 1 civil action. I could build an alchemy directly, maybe aiming towards getting the science production started very quickly, maybe allowing myself to go into iron Code of Laws relatively quickly and still being able to go into a government form at some point. But there is now actually also a printing press available, and I haven't committed to a second lab yet, so also going into printing presses could potentially be quite interesting. I have Nostradamus to protect myself, and I would very nicely be set up for Shakespeare, which I do think can be extremely important, being prepared for both Shakespeare and Bach, and also Darwin working very nicely. And with that, I at the end actually made a decision to indeed go for the printing press. The first civil action that I kind of have to spend is to increase my population, because Kogito has seeded one event into the deck at his last turn, and this event was the rats. So I really need to increase my population here. That's a given. After that, I have 3 civil actions left. I could go for 2 iron upgrades, maybe leaving myself open for that copy of printing press, going for that at the next turn. I could just go for 1 upgrade, grabbing the printing press to have it available for certain. At the end, I made a decision that I want to go for the science production first, but not with the alchemy, instead with the printing press. It's a bit awkward with already having taken the alchemy, and just building an alchemy would also be fine, but with those leaders in H2, I at the end valued it just too much to have those printing presses running, and made a decision to build one, and with that get out of corruption and be at 3 science production. And at the next turn, with my 6 resources, I can just go for 2 iron upgrades potentially, and with that hopefully set up a nice economy, be prepared for Shakespeare, and also thanks to Nostradamus starting to generate a bit of a culture lead. And then also, of course, I will reveal the fighting band tactic to make it as likely as possible that I win the vast territory, even though it means that chances are now even longer that I will draw an event, and indeed I don't draw an event and can't seed at the next turn with Nostradamus. Kogito is willing to seed, and the Crusades are open, so it's a bit of a culture swing, which I'm definitely happy to see, even though Kogito will actually only lose 2 cultures, so he nicely managed to dodge that event with staying low in culture. And now only losing 2, but of course I still gained 4 culture, and that's still nice for me. Kogito will go for some iron upgrades this turn, and then goes for Eleanor and takes the printing press. Maybe the cards for 1 civil action are just not that great, and with that he just wants to make sure to have the printing press, also wanting to be prepared for Shakespeare. Now it is my turn. I can't push this turn with Nostradamus. I will again increase my population because the rats are still in the deck, and then I have 3 civil actions left. And I will this turn start going for some iron production. And then the tricky question for my last civil action was, do I just want to go for the second upgrade, or do I want to secure myself the second copy of irrigation? If I don't take it, I'm a bit dependent on the ocean liner service or on the selective breeding, and there are not that many copies of it. And I don't have that many civil actions, so just being civil action efficient and getting the upgrade going could maybe be nice, but I was actually willing at the end to take this copy of irrigation, because in 2-player games it can also just be very important to get the irrigation going quickly. Instead of maybe waiting until the end of H2 to get a food solution, because especially if you want to go for those culture leaders, having additional population income could be quite nice, and ideally I will be able to win the vast territory, in which case the irrigation can maybe also serve as a very nice long-term solution. So I at the end was willing to pay this 1 civil action, even though it also results in losing 1 resource with me delaying this upgrade by another turn. Also, with not taking any card from the row, I make it that it will be another H1 turn for Kogito, so he will only draw H1 instead of H2 cards with Eleanor, which I think is nice. What I wasn't too happy about is that both those science yellow cards will be available for 1 civil action for Kogito, which I think is a big help for him. But I just didn't have the civil actions to take any of those away. I was happy that I draw an event so that I can continue pushing again with Nostradamus the next turn. The barbarians are revealed. At the end I don't get punished for seeding it, and just it ended up being a neutral event. Kogito will upgrade the last iron mine, will go for the Machu Picchu, and then also takes the breakthrough and builds another step. It wants to be civil action efficient and doesn't end up taking the cultural heritage, which I do think makes sense. And then, he has now the Machu Picchu, has the irrigation, can set up a strong economy, a big food income, and with the printing press, he is also nicely prepared for those culture leaders, so he definitely is not in a bad position. But I was at least happy that I, for the moment at least, have this nice culture lead going, and also I have the iron now, I have the printing press already running, and have the irrigation that I can maybe start building. But Kogito might have the bigger production, and I was a bit worried about where this game might be heading towards. And I also was really hoping that I might have a chance to get a government formed relatively soon. H2 starts, I will seed the knowledge of the ancients into the deck, and as you can see there's a very early Republic revealed, which I have the chance to take at my turn. But first of all, I will see it, and the event revealed is the vast territory. I was willing to go all in, sending all of my warriors and the 2 colonization card, and I was very happy that at the end win it even for a bit cheaper. I only have to send 2 warriors away with the fighting band tactic and 1 colonization card. And no, then it was a little bit of a tricky question on what to do. And especially if I am willing to take the Republic here for 3 civil actions. I have a free hand space thanks to the Library of Alexandria. I could just now, after increasing my population, which I definitely again want to do because the last event in the deck is now the Reds. So I could just take the Republic and then either just accept corruption or build 2 warriors to get out of corruption. By the way, Kogito, of course, at this point has also seeded 2 events. Those 2 events are actually 2 colonies, the Historic Territory 1 and the Developed Territory 1. And no, it was a tricky question because first I thought I just have to take the Republic here. It's just too valuable and it could just be too dangerous being stuck on a low amount of civil actions. But then I have corruption, I don't go for those iron upgrades, I think I just generally miss out on a lot of value, or I build those warriors but then I'm heavily committed to warrior again without there being a colony where I necessarily want to send multiple warriors towards. I don't draw any cards for Nostradamus, so I do think it comes a bit of a cost. Probably I would prefer to just have corruption if I go for the Republic. But I can take it, and either can do a revolution at the next turn, which again would be quite costly, or I delay it and just go for some upgrades. Maybe it's still the correct play, just playing it safe, take the Republic here. At the end I actually made a decision to not take it here, instead go for maybe a bit more of a clean turn. This turn I go for an iron upgrade, I go for another printing press, and I will take the cultural heritage, which looks a bit questionable at first, because I could also just go for another iron upgrade, and I don't have the most civil actions, but that copy of cultural heritage will allow me, just in case Kogito doesn't go for the Republic, to go for the Republic at the next turn, which could potentially have some very big benefits. And if I don't get the Republic, which I kinda expected, I can still use it. Maybe it helps me getting quicker into Conmon while also getting Code of Laws at some point. So I at the end was willing to take the cultural heritage here, and I was willing to not take the Republic, but I kinda expected that Kogito will now take it away because it's just very early and it would give me a very big boost, and maybe he has to deny it during his turn. So maybe I should have just taken it, but I felt I have at least a Code of Laws, so I won't be stuck on 4 civil actions. I can go for the Code of Laws and then maybe still have a shot to getting the Conmon at some point, and maybe get the additional science of the printing press, the cultural heritage, and also the additional resources of not having corruption and going for the iron upgrade. Was a close call for me. Maybe I should have just played it safe here and taken the Republic, but at least Kogito denying the Republic will also mean that he sacrifices 2 civil actions. Who knows, maybe there will be an important card, something like one of those culture leaders or something else, and then maybe it's not that easily possible for him to take the Republic. I will then draw 2 cards. I draw 1 event, the Independence Declaration, which is a bit risky to seed though, with me having won the vast territory. Kogito seeds, the Reds are revealed. The event that he seeded here is the Immigration, which he at the moment would be winning, as I don't have any happy face. Kogito this turn actually grabs the Cavalryman, takes the Engineering Genius, goes for the Printing Press, and builds one. And as you can see, he actually doesn't go for the Republic here, which is definitely interesting. I felt like maybe he has to go for the denial here. Of course it can backfire. Maybe he has to be a bit concerned about hand space. And of course there's always the chance that a Conmon will show up early, but at least I have to take it for a lot more civil actions than I would have to take the Republic now. So I do think it's good to not overextend in going for denials in 2-player games, but from my perspective it felt like this Republic will give me too big of a boost with being able to go up to 7 civil actions now at my next turn. Maybe Kogito was hoping that I will end up being stuck on 2 military actions if I should miss out on this trilogy, but then he also is actually somewhat forced in order to punish me in that regard maybe. So yeah, I felt like maybe it could have been worth it, especially because he only takes the Cavalryman, which is maybe a card that he really wants to have. As you can see, he has the Medieval Army tactic available, and so maybe also if he doesn't take it, who knows when the second copy will be available. But if I take this copy of Cavalryman, then at least he is guaranteed to get the second copy at some point. If I don't take it, he can still just take this copy at the next turn. So I do think with the alternatives being available for this turn. Maybe it could have been worth it to just deny the Republic and deny myself the big civil action boost at my next turn. But I do think you have to be careful. You can easily deny something in a two-player game and then just the opponent finds some alternatives to play around it. Now it is my turn. Even though it is risky, I at the end was willing to seed the Independence Declaration into the deck. The event revealed is the migration, so Kogito will get an additional population. And now there are some interesting stuff coming down the road. Both copies of Opera, Shakespeare, Darwin, so some very interesting leaders. But first of all, with the Republic being available, I was of course very happy that I had the chance to get the civil action boost. I can play the cultural heritage, I can develop the Republic. I will go for one iron upgrade. I could also go for an additional printing press, and I might still do it this turn, but the question was whether I am maybe willing to actually take Shakespeare here for 3 civil actions. And maybe I should have taken Shakespeare for 3 civil actions here, because he is just extremely strong. The amount of science and resource that you save, and then the big culture potential that you will have once you have all of those pairs up and running is just so extremely big. And with the additional yellow tokens from the vast territory, hopefully I will have the population to go for a bunch of pairs without any big problems. So maybe I should have just taken Shakespeare here for 3 civil actions. But now that I am on Republic, and maybe if the strategy gets denied, Kogito can maybe go for a bit of a military push with Napoleon also, so I could get a bit punished. And also there's Darwin coming down the road. When I build another printing press, will be able to get 4 culture out of him, might save some civil actions, and I can still also build some operas and maybe also be competitive with Darwin, and I would be able to get my leader for cheaper. Also, Kogito wouldn't be nicely set up for Darwin, so I felt like maybe I don't necessarily need to take Shakespeare for 3 civil actions, as I can just get a perfectly solid leader anyway for 1 civil action at the next turn, and I can just do some stuff. This turn I will now go for an iron upgrade, build a printing press, and at the end take some cards, but the cards that I take are maybe a bit questionable on how much I really need them, and I do think Shakespeare's just in a league of his own in terms of how strong he is in a 2-player game and how strong he is in case the game will end up being a culture fest. So I maybe should have just taken Shakespeare, knowing that I will be able to get a copy of Opera, and I maybe could have already built the first pair, or maybe potentially even 2 pairs at the next turn, starting some really big culture production. So I'm not totally certain if I made the right call here, but I do think it also makes some sense to just wait, as Darwin also should be a very fine leader for myself. So I will go for another printing press. Then I have 2 civil actions that I can use to spend to take just some cards. I could, for example, take one of those yellow cards, but I didn't like that too much, as it would mean that Shakespeare falls down to 1 civil action instead of staying on 2 civil actions for Kogito. And I was thinking that he might now be willing to take Shakespeare for 2 civil actions, and at the end I just ended up taking the Masonry, which is a bit awkward. I already built 3 of those printing presses, but it might still save me 3 resources if I maybe go for 3 operas. There are some interesting wonders where it could give the civil actions back, so I felt like it could still end up being a fine technology. Long term, maybe I will even build more urban buildings than the 3 operas. And I also took the Swordsman, which is at least nice to have as a backup, as there's only 1 copy of Rifleman in 2-player games. So yeah. But with those 2 civil actions maybe being somewhat questionable, I have now a lot of technologies in hand, at least thanks to the library in the Republic. I have a lot of hand space, so it's maybe not too bad, but as those civil actions are not spent that nicely anyway, maybe I should have just taken Shakespeare for 3 civil actions here. Then I again draw some cards. I draw 2 colonies. Maybe I have to think about if I really want to put them into the deck, despite of course wanting to seed with Nostradamus. Kogito seeds one more time. He puts the Good Harvest into the deck, which might give him a lot of food, with him having the Machu Picchu online soon. The Knowledge of the Ancients is revealed, which sadly gives Kogito an additional resource compared to me. He indeed will go for Shakespeare, he will go for the opera, and he also elects Shakespeare immediately, getting some civil actions back, which maybe makes the turn cleaner for him, because now he can actually set up a pair and finish the Machu Picchu, getting the big resource boost, while also going up to 6 culture production and having the potential to maybe build more pairs in the near future already. Also, he reveals the classic army tactic, which could encourage me to deny the Rifleman, but maybe he just wants to keep some other cards in hand, especially with knowing that there are some colonies coming. Maybe he wants to keep some colonization cards. Now it is my turn. The first decision that I have to make is whether I want to seed one of those colonies, and as you can see, I actually made a decision against it. because I have only 2 military actions. I have the library, but I don't know if there will be a chance to grab the strategy. Kogito has 4 military actions and has drawn a lot of cards with Eleanor, so I don't want to give him a shot at maybe winning one of those colonies just for a single unit, especially because I don't necessarily want to build more military units in the near future. So at the end, even though it means missing out on a bunch of culture with not getting the 2 culture for seeding and the 3 from Nostradamus, I at the end wasn't willing to push. Also, it allows myself to maybe have a chance to get 2 more draws before those colonies will be revealed, maybe making it that I have a bit better chances to potentially win one of those. And then during my turn, with at the moment not having a card that I want to push with Nostradamus, I just made a decision to go for Darwin immediately, who will give me 4 culture production and gives me the ability to take technology cards for cheaper. So I will go for him, I will take the opera, and then there is a copy of cannons, but I took the breakthrough. Basically, I for a moment thought about if I maybe just want to go for the architecture here. Not necessarily because it's good for myself. I already have the masonry in hand and I have already built a bunch of urban buildings, so I do think it would be too costly for myself, but I do think in those peaceful games the architecture is just an extremely strong technology, and Kogito might have the potential to still save a lot of resources, and now with taking the breakthrough I will actually give him the architecture for 1 civil action. But at least it would cost him a bit of science. He has some good resource income anyway, and maybe it will make it that he can't as easily go into an H3 government form. So at the end, I felt like the breakthrough could also be a very strong card, and it's a card that helps me a lot more than the architecture. With already having the masonry, so I just went for the breakthrough instead of going for an architecture denial, but I do think in those peaceful games the architecture has a lot of potential, and I was a little bit afraid of giving it to Kogito, but with having the Shakespeare discount and the Machu Picchu resource production, maybe it is indeed true that he actually doesn't need the resource savings that much, so at the end I thought it's not worth it to go for the denial, rather just take the breakthrough for myself. And then with my last 3 civil actions, I made a decision to start going for those irrigations. Soon there's a good harvest coming, and I just think it's important to get the food production started now so that I can maybe start building some operas relatively soon, maybe already at the next turn. I could potentially go for operas, masonry, and start building one, getting even more culture income. At the moment, I still have a bit more culture income than Kogito. I have a relatively big culture lead. So I thought I have a fine position, but Shakespeare of course has a lot of potential. One card that I am not taking here is this copy of cannons. Maybe questionable, I could have taken it for just 1 civil action with Darwin, but I don't have a tactic for it. I know that there's the classic army available, which I might be able to copy at some point, and I might also, if either Kogito takes this copy of cannons, maybe he won't do it because he has the classic army, and then I can just get a second copy. Or if he doesn't, then with me having Darwin and those many civil actions, it's a lot more easy to for me to maybe take one of those copies of cannon, the last copy of cannon, away from Kogito instead of Kogito taking it away from me. So I thought it's not too bad to just leave this copy of cannons falling down the row. I will keep the war, 1 colonization card. I will 1 colony. I will actually draw a colonization card, which might be quite nice, because now one of those colonies will be revealed. It's the historic territory 1. I just thought I will go all in or build my warrior and all of my cards for both colonies, hopefully making it that I will at least be able to win one of those. And I am now actually able to win the historic territory 1, so a bit lucky to have drawn this colonization card. I will now get an additional 6 culture, making my culture lead even a bit bigger, and also the happy face might allow myself to just go for some operas and without needing to go for a happy face solution in the near future. So I win it for just a warrior, which I was happy about. Kogito will go for the journalisms, allowing him to set up maybe a bit more science production. He will build one with a discount, going up to 5 science production, and then he starts some food production, knowing that the good harvest might be revealed soon. As you can see, he doesn't even take the architecture, so I was happy that I didn't go for the denial, as Kogito doesn't want to have the architecture anyway. I do think it could still be a strong technology for him to have, but on the other hand, he might have enough resource to build all of his stuff anyway. Now it's my turn, and I was actually willing to cede the immigration here. It means that I don't win the developed territory for certain, and Kogito just wins it for warrior, but very likely that would also be the case if I just rebuild this warrior now, and I would miss out on the draw then, and so I just was willing to push this event deck forward. The developed territory is revealed. Kogito is able to win it very cheaply. And now it is my turn. One card that I definitely want to take, as it only cost me 1 civil action thanks to Darwin, is the strategy. I was very happy to have the opportunity to not be stuck on 2 military actions for any longer. And I actually also made the decision to just develop the strategy, making myself strongest instead of staying weakest. There's one unknown event from the H2 events. I know that the next one is to get harvest, so maybe it's not that much necessary, but I will draw more cards, and I just think it's a nice technology to develop. I could have also just started some culture production with maybe going for the opera and the masonry and then going for the strategy later. But I thought I have a nice alternative on what I can do this turn instead of building an opera. And that is actually, after increasing my population, to build an additional farm. And now, with this farm and a good harvest coming, I will have a lot of population to work with. I do think I have the yellow bank to support having a third farm. And yeah, there's also an ocean liner service that I could have gone towards, but I felt with the good harvest coming, the ocean liner is not really that much needed, and just going for normal food production is maybe the better solution here. Then I also wanted to take 2 cards, the revolutionary idea and the architecture. Maybe a bit questionable to take the architecture, maybe the additional civil action and the 3 additional signs to the masonry is not really worth it. On the other hand, it will still save me some resources, and at the end I was just willing to take it. I could have also denied this copy of Rifleman, as Kogito has revealed a classic army tactic, and he really might want to have this copy of Rifleman. And I also could use it very nicely, maybe using Rifleman instead of Swordsman to go for the classic army, leaving myself better prepared for potential H3 tactics. But at least I have this copy of Swordsman in hand, so even with not getting the Rifleman, I still have a way to get a classic army. And at this point I was not really thinking much into the direction of going for a big military push or something, because I could of course go for the Rifleman, set up for a classic army, I have at least this war in hand, but it will take a lot of time, I will miss out on a lot of draws, and I don't know at all if I will get any H3 wars, so I rather wanted to at this point focus on a peaceful game, and then at least it is maybe even nice that Kogito has to spend 2 civil actions at his next turn to take the Rifleman, instead of maybe being able to do something else. So I thought that maybe the civil action cost could actually be a bit annoying for Kogito, and especially if this game will remain peaceful, but maybe he has to take it, and I still have the swordsman, so that I can also still go for the classic army if needed. Then I have 1 civil action left. I don't want to develop the masonry now that I have the architecture. There's not really anything that I could take, but there was one thing that I thought could be nice doing. I could rebuild a warrior, but I know that the next event card is no colony, and I also don't have knowledge about any colonies from the H2 events. There's only 1 unknown event for me in the deck. And at the end I actually made the decision to build a 4th mine here. So this turn I actually built a 3rd farm and a 4th mine. And I do think at some point Martin Becher, the world champion, wrote, I think maybe in one of his interviews or just in a discussion on Discord, that he doesn't like the Machu Picchu that much, and that the Machu Picchu is basically just like an inhabited territory 1, which seems like a little bit of an odd comparison at first, but of course it makes sense, because instead of building the Machu Picchu, you of course can just build a 3rd farm and a 4th mine if you have the necessary population, which you might have thanks to winning a colony, in my case the vast territory 1. So I'm basically building my own Machu Picchu here, just not with it being a wonder, but with it being possible thanks to me having additional population available. And with the good harvest coming, I will have enough population that I can then put into operas, maybe also military units in case I will need to build some. So I felt like it was maybe a nice opportunity to get some additional economy going this turn, and maybe with the next turn I can emblade a revolutionary idea, go for architecture and opera, and start building up more culture production so that I can maybe keep the culture lead that I'm having at the moment alive for a little bit longer. I will then draw some cards, a colonization card, and also a very interesting tactic, the mobile artillery. And that could be nice to have, as I for that don't really need to go for the swordsman. It's a better tactic than a classic army with me having no technology developed in no unit at all. And I know that I get a cavalryman for certain, but the cannons, now that I have skipped the first copy and Kogito hasn't taken it as well, might the Last copy might be contested, so I don't know for certain yet whether I will be able to go for the tactic or not. Kogito this turn goes for another upgrade. He knows that a good harvest is coming, builds another opera, with that has the second pair going, goes up to 13 culture production, and then takes a copy of Rifleman. And now it is my turn. I could potentially seed, but I still was a bit worried about pushing those colonies into the deck, and so I instead passed on seeding. And then this turn I made a decision to go indeed for opera with the architecture. Going for both of those technologies was something that I had to think about first, because it means that I won't go for the swordsman this turn. And if the age should end before my next turn and the cannons will be taken away, then I don't really have a tactic to work with. But I thought it is very unlikely that Kogito will go for denying the cannons, and I will actually take not any cards that aren't in the discard spot this turn, meaning that I thought it's maybe also quite likely possible that the age won't end before my next turn and I get another chance to develop the swordsman at the next turn, and I don't want to commit to them now that I've drawn the mobile artillery tactic. So I had to think about it, as I could potentially leave myself vulnerable, but I do think it's very likely that I either can get the mobile artillery running or still get the swordsman out at the next turn. So I was willing to go for the opera with the architecture, go up to 11 culture production at least. While I don't have Shakespeare to give me a discount, at least I have the architecture now to make those operas. Also only cost 6 resources. I will then increase my population to just use my civil actions effectively. With the good harvest coming, I will again have a lot of food, and it might be a bit bad if I then have to increase my population a bunch of time in this next turn because of having that much food saved up. And with the last civil action, I then made the decision to go for those team sports. I thought about the efficient upgrade. At some point, maybe it could be nice to upgrade those printing presses to multimedia. But at the end, I thought it's maybe not bad to at least have Happy Face Lucian at hand. And there's Pierre in the game, so the team sports seems to be worth grabbing. I could have built a warrior, maybe there could be a colony coming, but there's only one unknown event, and with that I was willing to, especially with having the mobile artillery tactic in hand, to leave this population sitting around here instead of committing it to a warrior. I draw another colonization card, maybe making it that seeding one of those colonies could actually become more worthwhile again, and I also draw the economic progress in another war. Now it's Kogito's turn. He will push this turn, meaning that now the good harvest is revealed. We will both gain 6 additional food out of it. A copy of cannons is coming down the road, so I was interested to see if Kogito is indeed willing to deny it, but I expected that he won't go for the denial, especially with only being on 5 civil actions. He will increase his population, he will go for another opera, he will increase his population again, he will go for another printing press, going up to 19 culture production, so he's definitely dangerously coming closer to me in culture, and with the last civil action he then will go for developing the Rifleman, maybe just to be civil action efficient. He has more than enough science anyway and might want to build some of those units soon anyway. Now it's my turn, and this turn I was willing to seed again. I could get punished if there's a strong H2 colony that I just give to Kogito, but with him not going for any more units, maybe it doesn't seem that much like there's a colony coming. On the other hand, I have no units, so there's no need for Kogito, of course, to go for maybe more units in order to increase the chances of winning a colony. So I could definitely get punished, but at the end I was willing to take the risk and wanted to seed one of my own colonies in there, now that I've drawn additional colonization cards, and now that I also have the strategy to be able to keep more cards in hand and draw more cards. I do see the strategic territory. Also, there's one event that is nice for me to see, the Independence Declaration being revealed, meaning that Kogito will lose a blue token and a yellow token, which is definitely a bit annoying for him, especially the yellow token. And in this turn I was willing to take the cannons, making it certain that I will be able to go for the mobile artillery tactic this turn. I don't have enough science to develop the cannons, so instead of building a unit, I again just waited with it, and after taking a breakthrough, which I think is also a must take, getting that card for 1 civil action, I just built again another opera, increasing my culture production again, and then I have still a bunch of civil actions left. I could just take a bunch of cards, but I also have somewhat limited hand space. I can only take 1 more card in hand, and so instead I thought about a way how I can actually do some nice stuff with my civil actions, and I actually found a thing that I can do, and that is building an additional lab. Which maybe doesn't seem too great, but I have Darwin, so it is basically like building a printing press, getting a bit of additional science, which I thought could still be worthwhile. I hopefully will still have enough population to not having to delete it in the near future, and then the science and also the little bit of culture I think could be worth the 3 resources in the civil action that I spent here. And then with the last civil action I can either increase my population or take the efficient upgrade, and at the end I actually made the decision to go for the efficient upgrade, which is maybe a little bit questionable because the only really good use case is maybe to go for multimedias, maybe also going for movies at some point could be nice, or going for computers, but it's maybe the use case is a bit limited, so maybe just playing it more civil action efficient could be an idea, but I think one of the reasons why I at the end was willing to go for the efficient upgrade, and I do think with that reason it then makes sense, is that I see the immigration in the deck, and if I increase my population now and then lose the 2 yellow tokens to the end of the age, I actually have an unhappy work and I will lose the population, so I basically can't really spend my last civil action to increase my population, especially because potentially maybe the event from Kogito could also be something like civil unrest. So I thought it's very important here to not go, to not have any unhappy workers after my turn, which I would have when I increase my population. So with that, I at the end ended up taking the efficient upgrade, even though if without those happy face related reasons, I would have liked it more to just increase my population, but at least I will lose a lot of cards to the end of the age, which is maybe not that ideal. I spent a lot of civil actions taking technologies that I at the end didn't end up using, so maybe some of those I could have prevented. Maybe I could have just gone for Shakespeare for 3, then I wouldn't have the Masonry and the Swordsman in hand. I do think the Code of Laws pick was necessary. The Alchemy, maybe I could have skipped it and just waited to go for Printing Presses. So I do think I didn't play ideally. I do think it doesn't necessarily mean that all of those picks were wrong, but having that many unused technologies in hand definitely is a bit inefficient, of course. And then I will actually also reveal the mobile artillery tactic, which of course gives a little bit of information to Kogito, but I can't deny myself the option to go for it, and I just wanted to be military action efficient. At the next turn maybe I want to start building a cannon, slowly building up a little bit of military, and then I thought it could be nice to maybe get more draws later on, potentially with already revealing it this turn, and also being able to keep more cards in hand. Interestingly, I do draw the fortifications tactic, which I was very happy to see, and now I have already revealed the mobile artillery, but now I don't even need a cavalryman, and I can save my science for some other stuff, which I was very happy about. I also draw the national pride in the arms industry. I will now lose 2 yellow tokens, but thanks to not increasing my population, I don't have any unhappy workers. Kogito seeds, and the immigration is revealed, so I do get rewarded for the choice. We both don't lose the population. Kogito this turn will go for 2 more upgrades. He has reached his urban building limit, so can't go for another pair yet. He also will go for the justice system, which I let stay on 2 civil actions for him, and then he goes for the wave of nationalism, which I think makes sense, as he will now soon overtake me. He almost has already overtaken me, and then maybe he just has to focus on defending himself, and for that the Wave of Nationalism is a very nice card. Now it is my turn. I will actually see the National Pride, the event deck will flip, and I was hoping that I maybe have some decent chances to win it, because after my turn hopefully I will have a bit more culture than Kogito still for the next maybe 2 turns. And maybe I also will still have more culture at the beginning of my next turn, even though that might already be quite close. So it could backfire, but if it works, at least I get 5 culture plus the 2 culture for seeding. I didn't like the economic progress too much, even though maybe it could be nice. So the arms industry maybe could be fine, but I don't going for cans yet. I at the end was just willing to take the risk, as I was a bit worried that Kogito is just now running away with the culture. Now we can see that maybe Shakespeare just has even more potential than Darwin, and is maybe in a league of his own, even though Darwin of course also is giving me 5 culture production, only 1 less than Shakespeare is giving, but Shakespeare has always also given those very big discounts. And so I was a bit worried, and with that was willing to take the risk with the National Pride. And there is actually the civil unrest, so here it was indeed very important to not have an unhappy worker. Now it's my turn. I first thought that I maybe want to start building a cannon now, just being a bit military action efficient, and also I kind of need to build a unit because the strategic territory is coming and I don't want to risk giving the territory to Kogito for just a single warrior. But if I invest 5 resources into the cannons, I'm missing 1 resource to also build another opera. And I also thought it's really important to stay, to not fall behind the culture production. Maybe that will make it more likely that I'm actually able to win the national pride. So at the end, I was actually willing to not go for the cannons, which is a bit awkward because now I will build a warrior. Which maybe can still turn out nice, in case I, with my colonization cards, will be able to win the colony even more cheaply than if I would have had to send away a cannon. But it's a bit awkward having to build this warrior when I have the mobile artillery or the fortifications tactic available. But I at the end just wanted to get the culture production going even quicker. And then I have a bunch of civil actions left, and here I thought about some different options. There's a copy of civil service, which I could take for only 2 civil actions with Darwin, take, develop it, have a lot of civil actions to work with. But I didn't want to invest my science into the technology yet, and I also thought it might still be available in my next turn, as Kogito has just gone for the justice system. I could just take a bunch of yellow cards, the reserves, the engineering genius, and the efficient upgrade, having a lot of resource to work with. And I will also go for 2 of those yellow cards, the reserves and the engineering genius. That might just be valuable, as maybe this game could it could be important to build a big Hollywood, or at least have the option to do so. But instead of taking an efficient upgrade, which again it's not certain whether I will be able to use it. I mean, with having 2 efficient upgrades in hand, getting a copy of multimedia definitely gets quite strong. But I thought there's another card that is just very important to take here, and that is the copy of fundamentalism. Taking that copy has 2 main reasons for me. The first one, which is maybe the more obvious one, but also the one that I thought is maybe the less important one, is of course that it could just give myself the option to go military heavy against Shakespeare. And it might be very important to have that option. Because if I don't take it, Kogito might take it, and then it could get quite difficult with having the tactic, with having the wave to do anything about him militarily, and if then it might be very difficult to, just keep up with the culture. So I do think it's very important to deny it from Kogito, have the military strength and additional actions available for myself, so that with the fortifications tactic maybe I can actually set up to go for a war at some point. But as I don't have a war, those military options are important, I think, maybe important enough to already take it. But another big reason why I wanted to deny it is that Kogito at this point is limited because of his urban building limit. And while maybe he would prefer to have something like democracy, if that isn't available, I do think fundamentalism would do a very nice job for him, as well as he could just start building another pair maybe, and thanks to additional strength it also will make it very difficult for me to punish him. So I thought if I give him the fundamentalism, he can increase his culture production even more. I can't keep up with it, I will fall behind, and I don't really have a nice way to punish him with the military. While now I was hoping that maybe Kogito will be stuck on his urban building limit of 3 for a little bit longer, and I have the fundamentalism for myself available to maybe have some military options in case I get the right cards, or if maybe Kogito plays it a bit greedy. So with that, I thought a fundamentalism is a very important grab. I thought about it if it maybe isn't worth it, because always there can be just another one of those H3 government forms be revealed quickly, but there's also a chance that those might remain longer in the deck, and then it could be very important having denied this fundamentalism. And even if those are revealed quickly, then maybe it could get more important that I have some military options, as it could then be difficult for me to keep up with the culture, even though at the moment I still have a small lead. If Kogito gets more urban buildings, thanks to an H3 government form, it could get quite difficult to keep up with the culture. I keep my colonization cards, the tactic, 1 war and the economic progress. I draw the impact of government, and also war over culture, which I was happy to have as an option. Especially, I was not happy to see this, because the democracy is now available for Kogito, and that might allow him to go really crazy with the culture production now, and now it could be very important to actually have this war in hand. So Kogito will go for developing the democracy, goes for another journalism, it's now 26 culture production. As soon as he goes for another opera, he's at 31, and that's just completely crazy. He will then play the wave of nationalism, builds a rifleman, also wants to use the last resource of the wave, and goes for an upgrade, making him stronger. and being a bit prepared for the military. He actually is missing 2 resources in order to go for 2 cavalrymen at the next turn, but I don't have enough science to go for both fundamentalism and cannons at the next turn, so sadly I can't really go for a war nicely at the next turn already. Maybe I can just develop the fundamentalism, but there's of course also the danger that maybe there could be a helpful event, even though I have knowledge about both economic progress and the arms industry, but not about freedom of movement. But at least freedom of movement doesn't help Kogito to go for a second tactic, at one tactic. But still, I thought it is better to maybe wait 1 turn before I go for a war in case I have the chance to do it. But yeah, I was very much worried because Kogito, as you can see, is just now completely running away with the culture, and he still maybe can find a nice way to defend himself. One nice thing is, at least thanks to me building the opera, when I see it now, an H2 event, we are just tight in culture, Kogito and I, meaning I can see it without there being the risk of me missing out on the national pride. So I really wanted to see it. The impact of government seems to be quite nice at the moment, but Kogito has the democracy now, and he might also get a military theory. I don't go for the civil service now that I maybe need to go for the fundamentalism, so it might end up being a bad impact for me, and instead I just seeded the economic progress here. And I do get a bit lucky here, and I was also very happy that I actually won the national pride, which was extremely close. We were tight in culture, and only because of the tiebreaker I was able to win this national pride. Then I will increase my population. I build a cannon. I still want to get 3 draws. Maybe getting a second war could be important. Maybe some strong impacts could be helpful. And also I don't want to commit too heavily, because thanks to being able to go for the fundamentalism at the next turn, I will have a lot of military actions, so my war can maybe be a little bit of a surprise. I don't want to indicate it too heavily and maybe lure Kogito into a bit of a trap in case he isn't careful here. And so I just want to build 1 cannon, especially with the mobile artillery revealed. Maybe it will make Kogito think like I can't go for a tactic already, so maybe, and that is quite nice actually that I revealed it, and now maybe it could be giving some misleading informations to Kogito. And then also a card that I definitely wanted to take is this copy of reserves. At this point I think I have to get a war going, and I think I need to deny just every possible resource that Kogito could get as help from the yellow cards, because if he doesn't get any resource yellow cards before his next turn that he can use for the military, he will be at 16 resources in 2 turns. And then he's just missing 1 tiny resource in order to be able to go for 2 cavalrymen and 1 air force, and that might be very relevant in order how nicely he can defend the war. So I thought I really need to take the reserves. Maybe I should then actually focus on not taking any other card from the row, making it as unlikely as possible that maybe another resource yellow card will be revealed. That might actually be very, very relevant. And in this position, at the end, I was still willing to take this copy of Urban Growth, as it might be a useful card to have for myself, and also it's also still a useful card for Kogito. But maybe it could also be more important to just not reveal any new cards here. But then it's the question how to use the last civil actions. I don't want to commit the reserves for food already, especially because it would mean corruption. I could then increase my population, and I would still have enough resource thanks to the other copy of reserves to build 3 cannons, but maybe I still need those reserves for resource at some point. At the next turn I can increase my population anyway, so then taking the efficient upgrade doesn't look that great. So at the end I was willing to give 1 additional card to Kogito and just take the urban growth for myself. Keep the colonization cards, the war, the aggression, as maybe I will get military heavy, and I was very happy to see that I have a second war available, so I do get a bit lucky here with having those 2 wars and maybe allowing myself to go for a bit of a military push. But now the big question is, what options will there be on the row for Kogito to maybe set up a nice defense? And I was very, very happy to see that there's actually no resource yellow card. There is the first copy of Air Forces, but there are 2 copies anyway, and so that one I think is not too important. But there's no resource yellow card, and that might make it that Kogito doesn't have the chance to go for a tactic with Air Forces. Kogito this turn will destroy a lab and actually goes for second opera. Maybe it's a bit greedy, but on the other hand, he doesn't have enough asset to go for an army with air forces, and after building this opera, he still has enough to go for 1 army. Still, it could mean that those resources might be missing at some point for the military, but it will also really produce him 5 culture per turn, so even if it will result in him being a bit weaker for potential future war, it might still end up being worth it. So I think it's greedy, maybe in a sense, but might just be the correct decision. And then Kogito, after taking the endowment, which might give him some additional culture, he will actually take the tanks. And that might be a bit of a hate draft, as he sees that I have the mobile artillery tactic. Maybe he is already having a feeling that I could have the fortifications, because I could have just early on taken the cavalryman. I do think I could have very easily just taken the cavalryman instead of something else. I think maybe the reserves was the card that I took instead. So maybe he's already having a feeling, but maybe it's still possible that I only have the mobile artillery tactic and just didn't have the ambitions to go for some military. So he goes for this. Maybe denial, at least he has the option to score some culture with it, with the Colosseum. And could still be nice to have it as an option, as an alternative to cavalryman, or to upgrade the cavalryman at some point. But I was happy to see it, as maybe indeed me revealing the tactic has given some misleading information to Kogito potentially. And then he is also taking the professional sports, which could just be a nice cheap technology to have. He doesn't take the air forces, but there is a second copy of course in the deck. And in this turn, with there being no resource yellow card, and with Kogito having committed to another opera, it's definitely now the time to go for a war. Kogito at this point has overtaken me in culture and is producing a ridiculous big amount of culture every turn. So I go for this war. I will increase my population. I will go for Chaplain, as it means that I have to delete one less thing, which might be very relevant. And also I will disband those labs, so the culture production is not really decreasing when I go for Chaplain. And I don't want to disband any mines, and also not a farm for now. So I will take Chaplain. I will then go for the Fundamentalism. Play the reserves 2 for resources, and that gives me an amount that is enough to build 3 cannons, so I don't need to play the reserves 3 for now. The question is, in order to go for everything that I need to do for the military, I need 6 civil actions, so I will have 1 civil action left after doing all of that. And the question is, do I want to take one of those technologies with Darwin before replacing him? And I made a decision at the end that indeed I want to take this copy of Air Forces, because there's at least a chance that the second copy will maybe stay in the deck for a very long time. And maybe I just want to open myself the door to maybe be lucky, and the second copy of Air Force being late, instead of Kogito having now the chance to take it very cheaply for only 1 civil action. And yeah, maybe it could be bad, because now the best defense that Kogito might be able to do would be to go develop Cavalryman, destroy 2 things, or increase his population once, destroy 1 thing, build 2 Cavalryman, take and develop satellites, he has a lot of science, and then take the reserves. And it actually requires all of the civil actions. Maybe letting the Air Force available could also mean that he either has to skip it, which could be risky, or he misses out on some important stuff of his turn. So maybe it could have been fine to let it be available, but if the second copy is late, maybe it could be important to still take the first copy here. I don't really take it for myself, as now after going for the fundamentalism and now after disbanding those labs, I have so few signs that unless I get a revolutionary idea the next turn, I probably won't make use out of Air Forces. And in 2 turns, it is already very likely my last turn, so I very likely won't make any use out of the Air Force for myself. So it's just a denial pick. I will go for a bunch of cannons, have the fortifications tactic, and with that go up to 32 strength, and hopefully will go for somewhat decent war, which at least makes up for the culture difference that I'm losing now every turn to Kogito. So I was still a bit worried, but I have the second war. I have the option to go for another fortifications tactic, at the next turn. And while building this opera maybe didn't hurt Kogito's ability to defend against this war that much, it might still hurt against the second war. But as said, it's producing him 5 culture every turn. So even if that should be the case, it might still be the correct decision, but it makes it of course now more likely that I will actually be able to go for a second successful war. Kogito seeds, and a crime wave is revealed, which uh,  hits him. It was an event seeded by him, so I was happy to see it. he will increase his population, goes for cavalryman, disbands his lab, builds another cavalryman, and then indeed will go for the satellites, develops it, and takes the reserves. So if the air forces would have been available for one, he maybe either would need to skip it or do something different, and I do think all of those actions are just very important, so maybe I could have actually just let him have the air forces and have a bit of trouble deciding on whether he is willing to skip it or if he wants to do the same turn, or if he is willing to do some sacrifices in order to take the air forces. So he goes for this defense. And during my turn it was very clear for me that I have to go for second war here, because as you can see, after the first war is evaluated, I'm actually just very slightly in the lead, and with this big production, Kogito will overtake me again immediately, and I just need to go for another war, even though there is a bit of a risk involved. Because Kogito with the reserves has just 12 resources available. As you can see, the second copy of Air Force is in the row now already, and he has just enough resources to build a cavalryman and an Air Force, and if he has drawn the shock troops tactic, he could actually defeat me in a war, in which could of course be bad, which might actually still be worth it if it prevents him from taking the Hollywood, but still, losing a war might be something that I can't allow myself, of course, but it's also, I just have to go for this war, so it's, I think, a risk that I need to take. This turn will be very, very likely my second last turn. If I take a card from the row, it's guaranteed my second last turn. And now it's the question on what to do. At the turn before, I destroyed 2 labs, because already the turn before I did some calculations, and now, as you can see, when I now again don't destroy any mine, and I will go for disbanding a warrior and a farm, I have now 11 resources at the next turn. I have this engineering genius, so despite me investing a lot of resources into cannons, I still have just enough resources to take and finish the Hollywood, and I have enough civil actions thanks to the architecture to be able to take the Hollywood for 4, even if it's in the 3 civil action area, and then have still 2 civil actions left to finish it. So that's why I just disbanded those labs instead of maybe already disbanding a mine. That I think is now very important, that I can go for the Hollywood. So I will go for those units, and then I have a big decision to make. And it's a bit tricky, because while I can take and finish the Hollywood at the next turn, I can't take and finish the internet if it is in the 3 civil action area, because it requires an additional civil action to build. And now, so the question is, of course, what will Kogito do? If he has the shock troops tactic, he will probably defend, and if not, then it depends on whether the Hollywood is available. If the Hollywood is available, I do think it's just that big for him. He will get Marlene, and with the current amount of urban buildings that he's having, plus Marlene, it will be a 48 culture Hollywood for him. So probably he will just go for the Hollywood if it is available. If the Hollywood isn't available, I think that would be good news for me, because ideally Kogito doesn't have the shock troops tactic, and then he can't win the war, meaning he will lose a war, and I will actually be able to just take and finish the Hollywood. And if that should happen, if the Hollywood stays in the deck, I do think I have very good chances to win this game, especially because if the internet doesn't fall down to 1 civil action, and in the 1 civil action area for Kogito on his last turn, he doesn't have the ability to just take and finish the internet, meaning he either has to take the internet, if it is even available for him as an option, for expensive, and sacrifice his ability to defend against the war, or he defends better and then he can't finish the internet, but the internet is at least not as strong as the Hollywood. So if the Hollywood stays in the deck, I thought maybe I have good chances here. If I win the war and don't lose it, because Kogito has shock troops. The question is, what happens if the Hollywood is revealed? How good are my chances then? Because if the Hollywood is revealed, Kogito might take it, and the question is, what can he then do to maybe defend himself the best? And that is probably to just take and develop the military theory. You would have just enough civil actions to take the Hollywood and take and develop the military theory, which would give him +5 strength, and also importantly, it would make it more likely that he can actually defend against a potential aggression. Because in case the Hollywood gets taken away by Kogito, I might have a chance to pull an aggression off, as he is then weaker compared to him trying to defend. And then that could mean that I actually have a shot at getting the Occupy going, which would mean that I have 14 instead of 11 resources, meaning I don't need the engineering genius in order to be able to finish the internet, and then I actually have the ability to finish the internet, so I will maybe win a war. While Kogito gets the Hollywood, I will be able to go for finishing the internet. The question is, how good is this even? And if I take the military theory now away, and Kogito doesn't have the option to go for the military theory, maybe he will then go for developing tanks, going for 2 upgrades, which would give him +2 strength, so he might be at 25. I would have a 17 culture strength difference, meaning I would steal 22 culture from him, meaning it's a 44 culture swing. And that, at the moment we are very close in culture. 44 is a very big swing, but if Kogito gets the Hollywood, he gets even more just with the Hollywood. He will have 2 times a bigger production than me, and he has already seeded 1 impact, could potentially have more good impacts, while I have at the moment an impact that maybe could be somewhat worthwhile to seed. So I thought that if I deny the military theory, then I might have still some chances to win if the Hollywood is revealed. Maybe I get the aggression off, but I felt like even then it might not be enough. Even when Kogito doesn't really defend a lot, just because the Hollywood is that big and he has such strong culture reduction every turn, it might be close, but I didn't feel too comfortable about my chances. So instead of taking the military theory, I made a decision here to go for, and maybe it could be worthwhile to deny the military theory because it might lure Kogito into going for some tanks upgrades to defend, and then if he should do this, I could actually go for an Occupy, and that would cost him the ability to go for Hollywood, while if he doesn't invest any resources into his military defense, he has the reserves, and even if he gets hit by the Occupy, he can still finish the Hollywood. So yeah, so that is a big upside of maybe taking the military theory here. But as I thought, maybe my chances are not that great if Kogito gets the Hollywood, even if I take the military theory away. I just wanted to maximize the chances that the Hollywood actually stays in the deck and made the decision to not take any card from the row. But I'm not sure if it is the correct decision, because now if the Hollywood is revealed, I might just lose the game. And it's only 1 less card that I take, so it is maybe it's a bit significant. There are only 7 cards left in the deck, and maybe it is true that if the Hollywood is revealed, even if I take the military theory, I don't have the biggest chances, but it gets closer. As said, maybe Kogito is lured into going for tanks, and out of the sudden with the Occupy I can't finish the Hollywood any longer, and because of that I do think maybe I should have taken the military theory here. But at the end I made a decision that I wanted to maximize the chances to let the Hollywood stay in the deck. That allows me at least to do one more thing, which could be nice. I will destroy this farm and build another printing press with the urban growth, which gives me an additional culture production now, an additional one at the next turn. And if I at the next turn either will be able to finish the Hollywood or the internet, it will also give me 2 additional culture for both of those wonders. So it might just give me some safe culture. And at the moment I'm at minus food, so I will be at 2 food at the next turn, and then I will be at minus 2, so I still have just enough food left to not have famine problems. But there's one issue, and that is that if Kogito seeds, I seed, and in Kogito seeds again, the economic progress might be revealed, in which case I would actually lose 8 culture because I then would have famine if I now destroy the farm, meaning if Kogito seeds is his next turn, I might not be able to seed, or it would at least be a risk if I put the impact of industry in the deck, and in case Kogito will actually destroy mine, maybe that could be potentially worthwhile. So and then I would gain 4 additional culture. Maybe I should be able to finish a wonder, but would lose some because I can't maybe push the impact of industry. Also, that might hurt for something like impact of agriculture. So I was not certain if that is actually the correct move, but I thought maybe there's a chance Kogito won't see it. And if I get a wonder, that's just nice to have, and maybe if I get the Hollywood, I'm in such a nice position that I don't really need to risk any longer anything, and then can just take the safe culture. If I don't get any wonder, I can rebuild the farm if I want to, and maybe have to take some risks then anyway. So at the end I thought it's maybe fine, it's at least one upside now that I don't take the military theory, and then I just take those 2 cards, and I maximize the chances here of getting the Hollywood at my next turn, so that Kogito hopefully will lose a war, and I will be able to finish the Hollywood. But I think maybe I should have taken a military theory here, because I do think it's somewhat reasonable that I then still have chances to win if the Hollywood is now revealed. While now, if the Hollywood is revealed, I think it's looking really dim for me, as Kogito isn't lured into going for tanks, meaning even if I get an aggression off, he can still finish the Hollywood, and then it's, even if the war's then bigger, at least he gets 5 strength from the military theory, it might still not be enough. So I think maybe I should have gone for that line here. I draw the raid, which actually could be an interesting alternative to the Occupy, giving me more resources and maybe doing more damage to Kogito, as the 3 resources lost from the Occupy doesn't really do that much, but destroying 2 urban buildings could do a lot. Kogito makes the decision to seed here, and a Prosperity is revealed, meaning at the next turn I can now safely push if I want to. But sadly, as you can see, the Hollywood still got revealed. I mean, it was definitely a decent chance that it could be revealed, and now I was somewhat unhappy about having taken the military theory, especially now after seeing the Prosperity revealed, because that Prosperity actually changes a lot. Kogito indeed will go for the Hollywood and takes and develop the military theory. That was the turn that I expected. But the Prosperity could be a bit of an issue for Kogito, because now he actually will have corruption because of it. Meaning that out of the sudden, if I steal 3 resources from him with the Occupy, he doesn't have enough to finish the Hollywood any longer at the next turn. And now I was very unhappy that I went for the line with him, giving him the military theory, because now he needs only 2 defense cards to defend himself, and he has drawn a decent amount of cards, and so I was just very, very worried that he might not now be able to defend, and then I just have clearly lost, because he will get a big wonder and I won't get any wonder. But if I should get the Occupy going now, then out of the sudden, because of the Prosperity, Kogito can't finish the Hollywood at his last turn, while I will be able to go for the internet. So that might be the thing that could now, after all the things that have happened before, could now decide the game, because if I get the Occupy through, it does an incredibly big amount of damage to Kogito, and I have good chances to win. If it doesn't get through, I basically have lost, and Kogito only needs 2 defense cards, so when I declared the aggression, I was not too confident and thought maybe I just blundered the game away with not taking the military theory. I mean, it was somewhat reasonable, I think. I didn't have knowledge about the Prosperity, but maybe could have lured Kogito into going for some tanks upgrades. And now let's see if Kogito will have the 2 defense cards. First of all, the war will be evaluated. As you can see, I have a bit of a lead, but Kogito will get a 48 culture Hollywood if I don't get the aggression through. So now it will indeed just depend on the aggression. And I do get lucky here. Kogito actually doesn't have the 2 defense cards, and I will get the aggression through, which I think is definitely quite lucky. Kogito had an amount of draws where it definitely is likely that he maybe has drawn 2 defense cards. It's maybe still also not completely unlikely that he doesn't have those, but still definitely very lucky that I have the Occupy and that it does actually go through. Now I have just a 14 resource that I need to finish the internet, and Kogito is now missing 1 tiny resource to finish the Hollywood for 48 points with Marlene, so that's an incredibly big swing. The strategic territory is revealed, we just both pass on it, and then Kogito will go for Marlene, takes the multimedia, can't finish the Hollywood, and he can play the endowment. But when we take a look at the culture before the final impacts, he will build a Rifleman. Maybe that could be an indicator towards impact of harmony or competition. And before the final impacts, I have now that big of a lead that with only 2 impacts being in the deck, it should be difficult or maybe even impossible for Kogito to overtake me. The first impact is the impact of harmony, which gives us both the same amount of culture, and the second impact is the impact of progress, which is a relatively nice one for Kogito, but at the end I'm able to win this game. And after having seen the Hollywood drop, I thought this game is maybe just over. Then I saw the Prosperity revealed, and I thought, maybe Kogito got unlucky and didn't draw enough defense cards, which at the end was indeed the case, and so I'm able to win this game, but I definitely felt like I got quite lucky, drawing 2 walls very early, having the nice fortifications tactic available, so I do think I needed quite some luck in order to win this game. Of course, I'm still happy that I managed to win. And I do think maybe this game is also a very good showcase on how Shakespeare is just maybe playing in a league of his own compared to a leader like Darwin, who doesn't give those big science and resource discounts. And because I accumulated some additional culture through events like Crusades, Historic Territory 1, National Pride. I got 2 successful wars going. I finished the wonder, and Kogito didn't finish the wonder, and still it's somewhat close at least. So even with 2 successful wars, and if we both got a wonder, it would not have been enough. So if the prosperity wouldn't have been revealed, and we both and aggression would have been successful, I finished the internet, Kogito finishes the Hollywood, he still would have won, despite me getting 2 wars and despite me going into age 3 with a culture lead. So here we can see Shakespeare's just incredibly strong. You have to set up for him, and maybe I should have just taken him for 3 civil actions, and at the end I got lucky that I didn't get punished for not taking him. Yeah, so an unfortunate outcome for Kogito here. I was of course happy to win it, and now the important question is of course, are there already some games finished that are there already some games of the other players finished, and do I still have chances to win the group? And we will take a look at that now. And there have been 2 other 2-player games finished. One in which Fjantarik won against Gandin, and one in which Gandin won very closely against Kogito. So Gandin, or Kogito sadly did manage to win against Gandin, but because Gandin lost to Fjantarik, that's not too bad for me, because I can still finish before Gandin if I win my last 2 games. However, in order to be able to finish before Fjantarik, I need to hope that Kogito will be able to win or at least tie his game against Fjantarik, because if Fjantarik wins, he will be at 23 points. And while I can also reach 23 points if I win my last 2 games, I sadly lose the tiebreaker against him. So yeah, here I'm very dependent on Kogito. It's quite an exciting finish. It could get very close at the end, and yeah, I just have to win all of my games and then see what happens in the game between Fjantarik and Kogito. And with that, I hope it was an interesting video for you. Let me know what you think of the game, and yeah, then thanks for watching and see you in the next video.